Make every night a wonderful journey, no matter where you are. Good night, sweet dreams. The first story, the nightmares. For the past month I have been waking up after horrific nightmares. I'm not talking about the nightmares where you are falling and wake up just before you hit the ground. I'm talking about the entire dream. I was overwhelmed with a feeling of terror and dread, the likes of which no words can truly capture. The worst part is that whenever I did have nightmares before, they weren't scary. Just maybe slightly startling. However, within the last week, I haven't had one pleasant dream. Only these vivid and horrific scenes playing over and over and over and over again in my sleep. This is the nightmare that has been occurring most often recently. I open my eyes and all I can see around me is darkness. Save for the bright light on the horizon from the shape of the light, I could tell I was in a tunnel or passage of some kind. I felt the impulse to start walking and began moving towards the light. All the while, I had the nagging feeling that there was someone or something, for lack of a better word, escorting me through the passage. After about a minute of walking, I hear what sounded like high-pitched static coming from behind me. The weird part was that I thought I heard the static forming words, as if that static were actually a voice. I just shrugged that notion off and made my way closer to the end of the tunnel. In the light I saw a silhouette walk into view. It was human in shape, but I couldn't get a good look before I tripped on a crack and fell face first onto the floor. Once again my vision cut to black and I could hear nothing. My only sense was of a cold breeze swirling around me. Then, piercing through the deafening silence, I heard what seemed to be children's laughter. I realized I was lying on the ground, and as I pushed myself up, the children's laughter grew louder. As I slowly opened my eyes, the children's laughter turned to blood-curdled screams. When my vision cleared, I saw I was alone in the middle of a field. No sign of children, and the cold breeze, now a warm wind creating waves in the grass. I felt the hair rise on the back of my neck. I turned to see the body of a child hanging from a tree. The child couldn't have been more than 6. His body distorted in an unearthly fashion. Where legs should have been were only stumps, dripping blood from the torn flesh and exposed bone. The arms appeared normal except they were exceptionally long and covered in slashes and scars. His torso was normal, except for the 5 long arcs across the chest that oozed scarlet blood. The most startling of all his features was his face. I will never forget that face. It was frozen in an expression of horror so spine-chilling. It is impossible to describe, and was twisted in an unimaginably distorted manner. Where his eyes should be were bloody holes, and his mouth locked in a silent scream. Even with his lack of eyes, I felt as though he was watching me. As I walked around to see his whole body, my suspicions were confirmed. His neck twisted, moving his head at the same pace I would move. Those empty sockets where eyes should rest were eternally locked on me. His arm then lifted and a crooked finger pointed at me. The wind became bitter cold and the skies darkened. The grass around me lost its green hue and turned a very dull gray. My focus remained on the hanging child. His mouth walked from a silent scream to a sickly grin. His mouth began to move, forming words with no sound to them. For some odd reason, I felt I knew what he was saying, although at the present I cannot remember exactly what that was. Once he finished talking, his body dropped from the tree and hit the ground with a bone-crunching thud. I stared at the distorted corpse for a matter of minutes, until a gust of wind knocked me on my back, and all I could see was the blackened sky. I was paralyzed. Staring at the sky above me, the only sound was the wind and a slight rustling coming from my right side. The rustling moved closer and closer until it stopped right next to my chest. All I could see were the clouds moving slowly across the sky. I had the feeling something was right by my side, and my suspicions were confirmed when I felt its icy breath in my ear. I tried to move, but my muscles refused to cooperate. When the breathing stopped, I hoped that its source would leave as well. My hopes were dashed when I heard it speak into my ear with a high-pitched, inhuman whisper. What it said sent a chill up my entire body. "He is coming for you next." After it spoke, it seemed that the world had paused around me. The clouds stopped moving and the wind stopped blowing. I wasn't even breathing at that moment. The last thing I remember before waking up was the pain of 5 sharp claws sinking into my abdomen, and the sky being blocked off by the silhouette from the first part of my dream. I only caught a glimpse before my vision cut to black and I awoke from the nightmare, drenched in sweat and gasping for air. I have never experienced a feeling of fear this strong EV in my life. I have no explanation for why these nightmares started. All I know is that I need some answers to what these nightmares could signify, if they signify anything at all. The second story. Swarms. The soft wilderness breeze whispered through the boy's hair as he walked on top of what seemed to be the constant woods that surrounded the wilderness. His parents said he was old enough to leave the house, but he could only stick to the trails his father had shown him, all the trails and where they lead to, readying him for his adventures. But as the boy explored, he had forgotten what his dad had told him to be on the trails, and as he moved his small feet off the trail, he didn't know that only bad would come of it. The soft breeze swooshed leaves around, forming a small tornado, and stopped, and the leaves gently landing on the ground. The boy stared in astonishment at the tall pines, the glory of the rolling landscape. The soft sound of the river swishing was strangely drowned out by a low buzz. It was a buzz, he recognized it, the sound of a mosquito or fly. He didn't worry, he had bug spray. He continued his stroll. When he heard it again, louder, closer, he turned his head in all the directions, but could see nothing. It kept getting louder, until he heard it right behind his head. He turned around, and time slowed down as he stared at an ugly bug flying towards him. It was huge. He realized it had the body and stinger of a bee, except 3 times the size of a bee. It had the yellow, blank eyes with dark red and white stripes racing down its hairy head and thorax, and its bare body like lightning bolts at the fangs on the side of its mouth like shoulder blades, except they were moving back and forth. Its mouth itself resembled that of a wettis. He screamed in panic and slapped it. It made a louder sound, like a locust in distress. Suddenly, Hans grabbed, swooped him up and took off. It was his father. The boy realized his father worked his way back to his house. The 3-story structure looming. His mother rushed out and waited at the doorway. Her eyes widened in pure fear as she saw the swarm of the insects chasing them. The father tripped, dropping the boy, who rolled away from his arms. The insects came in swarms at the father's body. His mother raced to get him, but the boy watched in shock and fear at what he saw. His father had stood up, but the insects covered his entire body. He screamed loudly, his mouth gaping open, and tons of the insects crawled inside his mouth. Some poked at his eyeballs and crawled inside the eye sockets after they'd popped out. The mother, screaming, picked up the boy and ran to the house, but more insects arrived in swarms, and as she dropped him in the doorway, they attacked her. The boy watched her scream her body shaking in tremendous jolts. The boy couldn't take it anymore as he watched her body stop shaking. He shut the door, screaming, crying as he climbed up the stairs as fast as he could. He ran into his room and crawled under his desk whimpering. He snagged a picture of his parents. He sat under the table and cried. His dear he cried, and after the constant buzzing of the bugs died away, he barreled through his front door. His parents lay on the ground next to each other, his mom must have rolling down the hill after she had been attacked. As the blood trail led to her body, he knelt and wept at their corpses. Their skin are rotten and was green, their faces twisted, as if the skin had been inflated and had slowly deflated. Their eye sockets were gleaming evil black, and their teeth were gone, and their mouths gaping open in endless screams. As he was done weeping, his eyes red from the tears, he heard a soft, whining sound, buzzing. The third story, the Lake of Souls. The soul of two poor animals in, but it would always crumble before the splash went away. Author's note. First pasta, can I have some feedback or something? Thanks. Deep in the forest, there is a lake that nobody has seen. Well, at least they haven't seen it and left alive. How do I know if nobody has left alive, you ask? Well, there has only been 3 people to live after visiting this lake. Me, myself and I. How do you know if it exists then? How do you know I am not just some crazy old bitch that lives in a shack? Well, then you go looking for it. But tell me first so I can say goodbye to your sorry ass. I have been cursed with being the dreaded lake's damned caretaker. Why? Because nobody else wants to do it and I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's why. No more questions from you. Anyhow, you see, is a lake of souls. Some souls go to the underworld. Some go into the sky and may live on. Some are trapped here on earth to forever wander. But this lake is a lake for murderous people. The people who live satanic lives filled with rage and disgust, and maybe even a little bit of hurt. The most corrupt and vile souls get delivered to my lake to forever swim in a circle where no life is able to grow. No fish, no insects. The trees around the bank are just dry wood now. Any animal unlucky enough to walk too close to the edge of the eerie, light blue water gets pulled in, skin melting away the instant it comes in contact with the water. For these souls are always longing to get out of the burning water that picks at their remains. Souls feel pain. To where do you think the heart is? If a soul didn't feel pain, what use would hell be? I am getting a bit off track. My apologies. Where was I? Oh, the point. There may have been one other person who had a death caused not directly by the lake per se. A boy. You see, this boy and his mother were outcasts, hated by their village. For what reason? Oh, I do not know, but they were amiable people actually. The village who sent them away is right outside of these woods. I believe they were framed. I do not talk to anyone, so I never know their reasons for strolling through my woods. I just wait until they fall death to my lake. Everyone seems to find the lake. Perhaps the souls whisper seductive words to the wanderers. Any soul can talk to a person if they are close enough, burrowing their voices deep in the stranger's victim's thoughts. All the souls are anxious to see a human face, because then they may be able to pull themselves out of the water and take a form, replacing their place in the lake with another body, to finish their unfinished tribe caused by death. Of course, the souls can always wait however long to leave. if they really want to stay in water that feels like fire. Watching over my woods one evening, I happened to notice a middle-aged woman and her young boy as they stumbled through the piles of leaves on the ground. They managed to encounter upon the only other cabin in these woods besides mine. I may have felt sympathy, may have they looked so innocent and lost and maybe even a bit terror-stricken. This small, run-down cabin in which they made their home was only their home for a few weeks before the woman's mind seemed to begin to wander. The woman had brought pictures, which she stored under the floorboards, and while her young son was out hunting, she would stare at them for longer and longer periods of time before returning them to their bleak storage area. The son hunted and cared for his mother, and the mother picked berries and cared for her son. I watched as the mother stumbled upon my lake, but she did not fall in. She seemed as if she was aware of what she was doing when she approached the incandescent, unbroken surface of the water, staring at the surface that only broke to the taps on the surface from below from angry souls. She knew what this place was. I could say I was quite impressed. She ran back to her son and told him to never look under the floorboards of the cabinet, told him she would be back. What her plans were, I will never know. Whether I have been cursed with agelessness or not, I am still human being human. I can only be in one place at once. I chose to stay at the cabin and watch over the boy, because I knew he would not be able to hold the urgent peek under the rotted, mossy boards. And fortunately for me, he waited as patiently as ever for his mother to return. Boring decision I had made until a few hours passed, and the boy became restless. He began pacing the floor, and I could tell he was becoming a bit fretful. He left to look for his mother. She should have been home by now. Oh, and that boy managed to track his mother all the way to the lake, to where her footsteps ended. He had become quite a tracker in the short time they had lived in the woods, and he peered in. "Hello, my son," rang a voice high and clear, so clear that the boy didn't budge before answering. The face looked so vivid and familiar, her beautiful long hair flowing in the fluorescent light, her flawless skin, and her vast crystal eyes. "And my mother," he stammered. "What has become of you? My son, help me. I cannot get out. Please help me. Give me your hand." The boy reached his hand out for the woman in the water to grab, moaning souls passing her through the water. "That's right. Mommy loves her son. I love you too, mother." The woman said nothing back, and her left eye twitched unnaturally. Something was not right about his mother. "Mother, you..." He pulled his hand back and the woman clawed the air. "You insolent boy. Give me your hand. Don't you love your mother? Givme. You or Godf. Or Sak. Nha. And E. Son. Mommyovsashrdn. Mommylovson. Helpme. He jerked his hand back as the woman jumped at him, but she fell back in the water, contorting her body into disgusted shapes. Poor, confused little boy, he ran back to the cabin. He did not understand where was his mother. That was his mother. Yet, it was not. He was so young, he did not understand. He fell to his knees once inside the Karami cabin. Silent tears rolled down his red cheeks. There was something discomforting about the woman's face. It was so dreadfully like his mother's. He lifted the floorboards of the cabin and saw where his absent mother had been hiding photos. Just photos. He picked them off the dirt ground that laid below the floorboard and flipped through them, hoping he would find one of his mother, so he could remember her face, because he apparently did not one of his father, one of his grandmother, another of people. He did not know one of his mother and a twin. His mother looked so elegant and graceful, sitting on a bench in the black and white photo. Was this what she looked like before they had moved to the woods? He could no longer remember the image of the withering woman, and the lake was haunting his mind. It almost sounded as if he could still hear her heinous voice. "Help me." The twin sported a black X on her face. Through the ink of the faded X, you could almost see the twin's eyes boring holes into your skin as she stared at you. The boy flipped over the aged photo and read, "Me and Anna, twin, electrocuted after gruesome murder of parents and first son, to brother, ex-uncle, and grandfather. And my sister on that list for killing me," hissed a voice from behind the crouched boy. "And her brat son, who wouldn't help me out of a hellhole of acid water. Too bad your poor burning mother won't be here to watch. That poor little boy. A bloody mess everywhere." I walked into the deserted cabin, but I could not even find his face in the smears of organs. At least he hadn't been tricked to join his mother in the hellhole of acid water, for me to look after.